Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. And as usual, I'll remind you, don't forget to join the mailing list. Just in case YouTube decides to cut me off for whatever reason, I'll update you about the show there. And I also send out a weekly newsletter highlighting the most important stories of the week in some kind of order. Kind of. Kind of. I'm working on the format. I've already sent out 2 and it's been pretty fun. Also join the forum. We've got a robust conversation going on about ways to protest. I've been talking about this for a while and just kind of hypothesizing on ways to acknowledge that the government is cracking down on specific ways of protesting, which is actually getting out. I think that you should get out. I think that you should be seen, etc., especially in light of the government saying that you're not allowed to do that. Protesting is an enshrined charter right, and the right to free, peaceful assembly is again enshrined. So going out and joining fellow citizens to say no more is a worthwhile pursuit, and I applaud those who are doing it. It's necessary, but I think that there are other ways to make our displeasure heard, and I wanted to talk about that. And I think that we should acknowledge what the government is saying and then plan for their response and find a way to get around it. And so that's what we're talking about in this thread. You can join it if you're interested. The link is in the description under the Canada Poly thread there. So it's interesting. All right, so here is, yesterday we were talking about the Major General who was on the COVID file and he was removed, and it kind of implied that there was a sexual assault or something, sexual misconduct or something to that effect aligned with it, but it didn't have any information about that. Well, the information came out, and it's kind of like the Brett Kavanaugh stuff. Kavanaugh? No, I've probably got that wrong. Sorry, I've got that wrong. But CTV News is reporting Major General Danny Fortin facing historical sexual misconduct allegations, CTV News sources. Major General Danny Fortin, the public face of Canada's vaccine rollout since November, is facing sexual misconduct claims against him that date back more than 30 years, CTV News has learned. Sources tell CTV News that military police received a formal complaint against Fortin in March, alleging a historical sexual assault. The incident, sources say, allegedly dates back 32 years to early 1989, when Fortin was a student at the Royal Military College in Saint Jean, Quebec. So he took it out? Is that the problem here? In college? And now it's okay, this seems like interesting. At least he didn't do the naked man, right? Like you come in, you see Marshall sitting on the couch there, and you go, "Oh, you misread the situation, man. Yikes! Put something on." I don't know what happened here, but it seems the more we find out, the stranger things get, right? Like 32 years. Okay. I mean, all right, step down. And I hope that the guy who takes over is a better person, I guess, who has never, ever misread a situation ever in his life. I don't know. Goodness me. It seems weird, doesn't it? It seems strange. So I've got a mishmash of governance stuff, and then we'll get into the usual tab structure that we've got. I just wanted, there's some stuff that's YouTube friendly and some stuff that fits very squarely into different categories. So this is the YouTube friendly stuff. Is Doug Ford's popularity in free fall? Is it? Do you think? Were you out this weekend in absolute violation of the stay-at-home orders that are probably going to be extended, or they were extended to June 3rd. They were supposed to be over on the 20th. June 3rd, I think they're extended to. Is Doug Ford's popularity in free fall? Yes. Yes, it is. And the only person that he has to blame for that is himself. And yes, he can say that the science people told me and all of these people told me that we had to do this. But he's the one who did it. He's the one who took away people's rights. He's the one who... at the behest of the science table, sure, but he still followed through with it, and he's the one who's accountable for it. Is his popularity in free fall? I don't think anyone will vote for him. The people on the left won't vote for him because they wouldn't vote for him anyway, because they will just label anybody who's the leader of the Conservative Party an evil conservative, right? Trump-like, just because they have a conservative bent. Fine, whatever, you can do that. You're not going to vote for Doug Ford. You weren't going to vote for him anyway. But there's a big mushy middle, and there's a lot of people who would be on the right side of the spectrum, I suppose, if that exists in Canada, considering Doug Ford's behavior. But there are a lot of people on the right who voted for Doug Ford, who defended Doug Ford on social media, who went out and organized for him in cities, etc., who went to his events. And they won't be doing that this time. They won't be doing that because they feel betrayed by him, because he betrayed his base. He actually spit in their eye, stepped on their foot, kneed them in the groin, and said, "Would you like some more? Would you like some more? All of the promises I made, nope." Right? So, is Doug Ford popular? Is his popularity going to rebound? Maybe. If he admits error and puts things back to normal, and I don't mean normal with a vaccine passport. I mean normal. I mean like Texas normal, right? Like you're proud to live in Canada normal, right? Not pastors being locked up and people being ticketed for being at a party in a restaurant, but not being ticketed for doing the same public gatherings that the anti-lockdown people were ticketed for last week, and even I think probably yesterday. The double standard is created by the person who's in charge, and that's Doug Ford. He's responsible for this, and I don't know who's going to win the next provincial election. I don't think it's going to be Andrea Horwath, because Andrea Horwath is arguing for restrictions. I heard, and I didn't research this, but I heard that Andrea Horwath is trying to institute a motion in Ontario limiting people to their medical officer of health jurisdiction. So if you're in like the Wellington, Dufferin, whatever, you can stay in that health unit, right? The crackdown on movement, the removal of freedom, again, on who? Doug Ford. Doug Ford. Is anybody going to vote for him again? But I don't know who else is going to step in to be the leader of the province. I don't know who else has the infrastructure in place, because you need the infrastructure in place. Like New Blue, great, okay. Who's going to be your education minister? Who's going to be your finance minister? Do you have anybody standing for election? Like, do you have anybody willing to be a candidate for you? Anybody else? Like, who else is in Ontario willing to challenge the Conservatives for leadership? Because Andrew Horwath is, right? The Liberals want to. The Liberals are just as bad as the Conservatives, probably worse. So who's going to win? I don't know. But I do know that Doug Ford's base is completely betrayed, and they won't show up for him easily, right? And if it's an election campaign that wakes him up and puts things back to normal, maybe he has a shot then. A lot can happen in an election campaign. But at this point in time, if a snap election were to happen right now under lockdown, Doug Ford's not winning that election. Nope, not a chance. But I don't know who would either. So, and it might be worse. I'll admit it might be worse. Aaron O'Toole is falling flat on his face. The Twitter people, like usually you get 1,000 likes with the Conservative Party leader. They've got like, I don't know, they've got quite a lot of followers, 128,000 followers. 128,000 followers, and he got 571 likes on this. And I would be willing to bet that some of those likes are manufactured somehow by some bots or something like that. Who knows how they'd manufacture that? But when Aaron O'Toole is doing the same garbage as Doug Ford, then people are looking for an alternative. Now, federally, there is an alternative, whether you like it or not. And there's lots of social media people upset one way or the other about Maxime Bernier, blah, blah, blah. But he is a viable option in Canada. And it looks like he's setting up for being viable this election too. But I don't know that it's going to matter. And I've talked at length about this before. I've talked at length about it, right? But Aaron O'Toole's tweet is falling flat. It says, "I will ensure our country is never unprepared for a crisis again." And it says, partner with pharmaceutical companies. The number one measure that he wants to address here is partner with pharmaceutical companies to increase production of critical medications and build domestic vaccine production capacity. Use procurement by government and those receiving government funding to strengthen domestic production of PPE, overhaul and rebuild Canada's national emergency stockpile system to ensure that we have supplies we need to be prepared at all times for future threats. Right, we were prepared and then we sent all that to China, right? So that's weird, right? Justin Trudeau's not very competent. Here's National Post says, how Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives can stop drowning in the polls. Oh, I'm not sure if I mentioned how many likes he has. 576 on this. Usually you get 1,000 if you're the Conservative leader. This has been in play since, for a day, I guess, May 16th, so more than 24 hours it's dated. So that's, you've topped out of your likes at that point in time generally, right? I don't know. The Conservatives can stop drowning in the polls by stopping chasing the Liberals or becoming a different party than the Liberals, but they're the same party as the Liberals. So yeah, they're going to tank in the polls because nobody wants what the Liberals are doing, and nobody's speaking to that in the provincial politics anyway. And federally, Maxime Bernier is touring, but the media doesn't talk about him. And if you talk about him on social media, you get called names, blah, 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 blah. So they use that to limit your ability to organize as a group. That's the core functionality of doing that, having the Twitter bots, because it's probably, there's an element of Twitter that is bots, same as Facebook. And if you're arguing something that you don't know with a friend of a friend on a public post or something like that, then you might be arguing with an algorithm or somebody who's being paid to push the other side. But these things do happen, and it's interesting because it shapes the real world. People say Twitter's not the real world, right? But it shapes the real world. People cite Twitter pressure campaigns as reasons for changing legislation. Right, they're taking the temperature of the public, and Twitter's taking the temperature of the public, right? But Twitter manages that in a way that is interesting. Did you know that you maybe hung out in $1 million home if you ever hung out in Toronto and hung out in a home that is like a single detached home? That's $1 million home. Here's what the Ottawa Citizen's saying. Here's what $1 million home looks like in 4 Canadian cities. Which one's Toronto, do you think? It's incredible. Like if you're just listening to the podcast, there's 2 condos, like 2 buildings that are looks like apartment buildings or condo buildings, and then 2 looks like detached homes, but one might not be detached. One's certainly detached, but it looks like in the 1960s or 70s it would have gone for like $50,000. Like it would not have been anything special on the street. In fact, I think the one next door to it is nicer, and I can only see the one wall, and the wall needs work, but it's still nicer than the $1 million home. So I think that's telling, right? Like when the real estate is so outrageously expensive, and we're the most expensive real estate in the world. Is that something to be proud of? Or maybe do we have an unbalanced something or other? The budget balance itself, I know, but how about the housing market and immigration? Does that also balance itself? I don't know. I don't think so. Here is to talk about immigration. Trudeau plans to bring 1.2 million immigrants to Canada over 3 years, unjustified given high unemployment, the recession, and housing prices. To put that new target of 65,000 refugees and protected persons per year, it's 2 to 3 times the average of the Harper years, and it's a long way from the 2019 Liberal platform pledge of modest and responsible increase to immigration, with a focus on welcoming highly skilled people. So that's where we're going. Yay! And if you were worried about inflation, I think this is U.S. From what I can tell, this is U.S. But it's still, there's a lot of Canadian people who follow this. Anyway, price of steel is up 145%, lumber is up 126%, wheat's up 25%, food's up 25%, cotton's up 35%, silver's up 38%, copper's up 50%, oil's up 80%, and all in 70 days. Isn't that interesting? Boiled frogs. Boiled frogs are thinking, it's getting a little warm in here, eh? Right? Here is travel restrictions. The bridge between the US and Canada is closed, unless, of course, you want to walk with your suitcase over it. And then no problem, right? Joe Warmington's reporting. This is, there's a helicopter flying over. It's quite loud, so I'm not going to play that. But he says, if you look closely, you can see people moving, walking across the bridge, rolling suitcases, right? And I guess you guys can't see that very well, but yeah, it looks, you can see people moving. I can see people moving anyway. So if you want to see people moving, the link is in the description. Check it out. Here is the protests in Toronto. Well, just to finish talking about this, Joe says, if you look closely, you'll not only see a helicopter over Rainbow Bridge, but also people pushing suitcases, walking across from the American side, or Niagara Falls, USA. Justin Trudeau might as well just open it up and close the quarantine hotels. So people are pushing back against what's happening, and here is footage of this. I told you that there would be drone footage, and here's that drone footage. Close that. It's a lot of people, and it's quite impressive, really. It's hard. It is hard to get this many people to protest it is hard to get this many people out in Toronto, I think. So you're looking towards the shore, like towards the water, I guess, and it goes all the way there. Like, that's a lot of people. It looks like we're at the Eaton Center here. And I don't mean to be so odd, but that's neat. This is going the other way. This is looking back, I think, now. But I'm not sure. That's water. Right? That's going one way. I don't know if we're going to turn around again. Anyway, it's a good video. Worthwhile. There are a lot of people who are upset with what's happening. Like, don't let the media impression of the number of people being arrested and the number of people being in the media getting consequences for their protests, etc., deter you. This is a popular protest. This is a popular movement. There are a lot of people who are frustrated with what's happening. And other people are coming out and protesting different things, and they're not being vilified. Interestingly enough, they're getting police and MLAs and other people sending supportive tweets for them to go out and protest. But anti-lockdown protests are putting us all at risk. That's an interesting use of propaganda and sloganism, right? But the Palestinian protesters, or the Israeli protesters, whatever side you're on, they are protected. They're just fine. They can do whatever they want. Weird, right? Notable. Kian Bex says 3 members of Jay Kenny's UCP caucus, United Conservative Party caucus, have put out statements supporting Palestinian radicals tonight. The same Palestinians that are currently organizing super spreader rallies in Alberta and are actively bombing Israeli civilians in the Middle East. Kenny's caucus needs work. So here's one of Jason Kenney's MLAs talking about the Palestinian events. And here is the Calgary Police. We anticipate significant traffic disruptions in the downtown core to continue until approximately 11 p.m. tonight as citizens participate in a protest for Palestine. Drivers are cautioned to watch for pedestrians on roadways. Now, I'm not going to compare the Calgary tweets before the anti-lockdown rallies directly right now, but I don't have time. Sorry. But it seems interesting that there's no condemnation. There's no... Hold on, I'm gonna go look. Well, I went back to April 7th and I didn't see any notices of any protests like steer clear of the area or anything like that. I didn't see anything like that for any other protests. But I did find this, which I thought was interesting. Their Anti-Racism Action Committee in the Calgary Police. So, yay, lucky Calgary. The United Nations should unequivocally condemn the 3,000 terrorist rocket attacks this week by Hamas against Israeli civilians, declare such acts a threat to international peace and security, and reaffirm Israel's inherent right of self-defense under the UN Charter. But it won't. So all of that's going on. But here's Aaron O'Toole. He says acts of violence, and within that context, in Toronto, during the Israeli and Palestinian protests, some Jewish people were attacked, and I showed footage of that yesterday. Aaron O'Toole responds to that. Acts of violence and anti-Semitism on the streets of Toronto and elsewhere in Canada are disturbing and unacceptable, says Aaron O'Toole. I echo the calls for Canadians to stand together against hate. We hope those who engage in these acts face the full extent of the law. And he says that in French. And then people start wondering, when is Trudeau going to say anything about this? He stayed silent until like 8 o'clock at night yesterday, which people did not find acceptable. People were saying Justin Trudeau's silence is louder than words. Here is Joe Warmington. He says, this came out 3 minutes after I noticed he still hadn't done it. Is this good enough? Too vague and down the middle? It will be interesting to see how people react to it. This is Justin Trudeau's statement. I'll read it in just a second. Dr. Kaur says, the tyranny you are creating does not tolerate gatherings to protest the draconian and harmful lockdowns your government is using to strip us of our human and constitutional rights. We will never give in to your tyranny. We will push back. And so Trudeau's statement says, everyone has the right to assemble peacefully and express themselves freely in Canada, unless you're protesting against anti-lockdown measures, in which case Alberta made that de facto illegal, and so did Nova Scotia. Interesting. Anyway, but we cannot and will not tolerate anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or hate of any kind. We strongly condemn the despicable rhetoric and violence we saw on display in some protests this weekend. I think that it's interesting that they say white supremacy is the most concerning issue, and they can't give any examples of violence created by white supremacists. And yet, we have violence on the first protest of its kind in recent years, and that's no problem. We condemn it, but it's no problem. Here's an example of the law enforcement targeting some things and not other things. Tickets issued after as many as 25 people found partying inside Toronto restaurant, right? But these things are fine. Here is Pastor Hildebrandt. He says, we will worship, the church must gather. So his church got together outdoors. There they are. They're worshiping, and it turned out to be a beautiful day, didn't it? Isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? Ezra Levent says, I can't find the Edmonton Journal's denunciation of the 1,000 pro-Hamas protesters who had a public protest in their city. I wonder what the difference is. Never trust the media party. Always remember that they hate you. Grace Life Church continuing to gather as Alberta steps up enforcement against scofflaws. Edmonton Journal. Interesting. Here at Fairview Church, mainstream media and the police are beginning to surround. They don't like the singing inside. Here, reporting for Rebel News in Calgary, Alberta, another pastor's been arrested, this time from Fairview Baptist Church. Tim Stevens is arrested. And you can see the evolution of that. This is Canada 2021. Very interesting stuff. Also, arsonists attempt to burn down Pastor Pulowski's house. Canada 2021, right? Isn't that wild? Here is an article that is difficult to read. It says... well, quote, now the kids are scared. If they break the rules, they feel like murderers, ungrateful people who are just terrible and selfish. But while following these rules, we're killing ourselves, slowly but surely, she says. It's an interesting article. I'll read some of it. It's only for 3 weeks, I tell myself, and then school will start again. You had school all year until now. You're one of the lucky ones. I'm a 13-year-old in 7th grade, and this is what the pandemic has felt like for me. I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I still get to go to school. I still get to see people at school and be around them. Still, it felt like nobody was really there. Usually we sat in a dark room with the lights off and the blinds closed, all of us facing some sort of electronic device, procrastinating and not getting our work done. There are no sports teams, no music rehearsals, no drama club. When I'd get home, the first thing I wanted to do is lay down on my bed and just look up at the ceiling every single day. I kept saying to myself, it's okay because next week will be better, but the next week was always the same as the last. I've learned that now, and I've given up. Occasionally, I would break down in tears and have to go to the school counselor for help. Some of my classmates have done the same. We don't really need to talk to this counselor, but what we need is to hang out with our friends. The thing that really bothers me is the adults don't really understand. They know, but they don't understand. Whenever we'd talk, a teacher would tell us that we were spreading spit particles around the room and that could get someone sick. If we stood up because we'd been sitting for 5 hours straight, a teacher would tell us to sit back down because we weren't socially distancing. This is what I've kind of been talking about the whole time when I was saying that the medical officers of health and the orders for the mask mandates and the physical distancing and what's happening in the schools is removing the rights of these kids. And it's removing their rights because they can't say, I have body agency and my body feels bad sitting here like this. My body feels bad with this on my face. They can't do what their body is telling them to do because the people in charge of them will tell them to comply with the rules that are set out. Their body agency has been removed by the rules that are supposed to be protecting them from this virus. But instead of protecting them from the virus, it is harming them. Is that acceptable? Is that the society that you want to live in? That's a question that we need to answer, and we need to answer it quickly because we need to fix it if it's not. And if it is, then you need to explain that to the people that are being damaged by these policies. And you being Doug Ford and the public that is allowing this to happen. I don't know if the public is going to just allow their kids to go back into school, into this situation, into the masking and the quadmesters and the uncertainty, right? The constant uncertainty. That's not healthy. Imagine not knowing what tomorrow brings. And I mean, it not mattering at all, right? Like, why does your grade 10 C in English matter? Like, oh, did you have a hard time that year? Could you go into that? Yeah, it was 2021. Like, there you go, right? Like, done, right? And I mean, if you fail it, oh well, right? Like it's, and I'm not trying to minimize, but I'm trying to crystallize that given the choice, and I was talking about this before as well, I think something like 40% of people who are in university, so you're paying for university, so if you don't want to do it or if it seems like a bad thing to pay for, you stop, right? 40% left. And in high school, you can't do that. But what they've done is they've taken what high school was and they changed it fundamentally. And then they said, well, you don't like this? You have to do it anyway. It doesn't matter, right? And parents were like, yeah, it's good enough. There's no studies on this. There's no data on this. The data all of the data says, more screen time equals bad for children. I think under 20 is the data for that. And they stopped doing the data on that past 20 because they probably don't want to know that it's bad for adults too, right? More screen time equals bad, right? Yeah, but you have to balance it. You have to go out and see people. You have to go walk. You can't just stay on your computer 24/7. That's not good for anybody, right? But we're chaining our kids to the computer, saying your social life is there and your school life is there. And why isn't that good enough? Why aren't you happy, Sally? It's obvious, right? It's obvious because we've taken away their future and replaced it with an internet connection and expectations. And the expectations are insane. Insane. Completely irrational. Okay, we're going to head over to the Redacted channel and finish off because I'm going to be talking about, I think that I understand what and maybe it's taken me a long time, but I think that I get it. I think that I get it all now. I think that finally I understand what this is all about, and I'll explain it in like 2 minutes. So if you're heading over to the Odysee or Rumble or BitChute, we'll see you in a minute. And if not, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingVoicely.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.